Good evening. My name is Lee Coleman, and this is Leez Feed, our podcast emanating out of the southern Illinois area of Illinois. Again, my name is Lee Coleman, and today I have the honor of talking about quite a few subjects with Larry Ivory, who's the president of the Illinois State Black Chamber and also the chairman of the National Black Chamber. So, having said that, we'd like to welcome aboard Mr. Larry Ivory. How are you today, brother?
Hey, just fine, Lee. It's always a pleasure to be on the show with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, sir, I am too. Hey, I know Larry Ivory, but I would like for Larry Ivory to introduce himself to the Facebook and the YouTube audience that will be looking at this broadcast later on. So, who is Larry Ivory?
Well, Lee, just a brief synopsis of me is that, I'm always proud to say I'm the son of the late Reverend Jeffrey Ivory and Gladys Ivory, who were tremendous parents who gave me the basic foundation of who I am in terms of serving people and understanding the value of what we're here for. And they taught me that at a very young age. I went on to get involved in a number of other areas. I was in investment banking with Merrill Lynch, and then I went to Solomon Smith Barney as vice president of investment banking. Then I left there and started a hedge fund, which was called the African Opportunity Fund, with partners in Ghana and partners in San Francisco, where we took a look at how to invest in the black diaspora because we saw that there was tremendous amount of upside potential in other markets outside the U.S. and we wanted to capture that for our clients. And I left there and came back to really my passion. I was trying to do the chamber and also do this at the same time. And the real reality of it is that you need to be all in. This is a full contact sport, and so I decided that I'd leave the investment banking business after years of being fairly successful in that business to really understand that I really needed to have a positive impact upon the black community, not just help people who are wealthy get more wealth, but I needed to take some responsibility of trying to help our community in terms of bringing them to another level, what I consider to be a part of our ultimate responsibility of strengthening black businesses throughout the country.
Okay. We've always had chambers. When you say chambers of commerce, I guess about 20 or 30 years ago, that was always a European concept. And then African Americans decided, along with other minorities, to start chambers. So tell us a little bit about the history of the Illinois State Black Chamber and the National Black Chamber, which you are an affiliate of and happen to be the chairman of the board.
Yeah, love to, Lee. Well, actually, what's interesting is that Booker T. Washington really started the first Chamber of Commerce years and years ago before they even had a traditional white Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
It was started by Booker T. Washington and a group of businessmen. Uh, when the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce started, it was an idea that we had saw the traditional chambers of commerce in Peoria and throughout the state, and fundamentally, they didn't look like us. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have black people on the board, and black business was not faring very well. So we decided that it was important because there were Hispanic chambers of commerce, but there was not a black chamber of commerce in Peoria. And so we decided that we would start the Peoria Black Chamber of Commerce. It was our first stab at this thing, and then from the Peoria Black Chamber of Commerce became the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce. I got involved with Harry Alford, who was doing some incredible stuff. Him and Art Fletcher, the father of affirmative action, was the chairman of the board of the organization, and he helped write affirmative action. We would not have affirmative action today if it wasn't for the late Dr. Arthur Fletcher, who was my mentor. And as I got around the
He was in the
national,
Nixon administration, man, right?
right, he was in the Nixon administration. He was advisor to four different presidents, not only Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Bush. And he was assistant secretary of labor, but he was a passionate person about black people who understood the game, and he invested a lot of time into young people. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the young people he invested time in, and we traveled really we traveled the globe together, to Africa, to Brazil together, and he invested a lot of time to help me to understand, my ultimate responsibility of giving back to the community.
Okay.
So the National was one of the most prolific chambers of that time, hands down, in terms of what it was doing to
Hmm.
empower Black people and really challenging the establishment across the board in terms of major corporations and their contribution back to African American businesses. And uh, once I hung around people like that, Andrew Young and others, I was obviously going to be fully engaged in helping to start the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce. They gave me the responsibility to ink 25 chambers in the state of Illinois, which would have been, at that point in time, the largest federation of chambers in one state would have been in Illinois with 25 chapters. So I was privileged to have that opportunity and to be involved with a organization that really was about helping empower Black people by empowering Black business and empowering the Black community.
You know, because of my association with you, which started back in 2001, I think it was, I had the privilege and the honor of rubbing shoulders, not to the extent that you have with Art Fletcher. And black people need to take a look and find out who Arthur Fletcher was. I think a lot of black people don't know who he was, what he did, what he meant to what we're trying to do now as African Americans in business and out of business. And in his honor, you started an Art Fletcher award during the ceremonies at your state chamber events. Talk about that just a little bit. What made you do that?
Well, Art Fletcher was a guy who meant so much to so many Black people, whether you were Democrat or Republican. And those who knew Art Fletcher, and if you were in the civil rights movement, you knew Art Fletcher because he was a part of Brown versus the Board of Education. He was a critical factor in that. He coined the phrase, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste," when he was the chair of the United Negro College Fund nationally. He was one of the first Black football players. He served in Patton's Army, General Patton's Army, and won the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
So he was really quite a fantastic guy. And when he came into the Nixon administration as Assistant Secretary of Labor, what they didn't know about Art Fletcher had a background in law, and he was taking courses in law. And so when he came in, he was able to take a look at some of the affirmative action issues, which is his legacy. And Art Fletcher fought, and he suffered a great deal. You know, his wife ended up jumping off the bridge and committing suicide because of all the pressure he was under. What he was trying to do was to empower Black people at a time where he would tell me he would walk into the White House and other Blacks, and there were not a lot of them, but he would walk into the bathroom and other Blacks would just leave the bathroom because they were so afraid to be around Art
Wow.
Fletcher because of who he was. But Art was no joke. He was well respected throughout the Republican administration and Democratic administration, and he fought and he gave his life to make sure that we would have a seat at the table. And he taught
Hmm.
me a lot.
That's great. That's great. You know, I think the Illinois State Black Chamber may have been the first black statewide chamber in the state of Illinois. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you are. You're absolutely right, Lee. We were the first Black Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce in the state of Illinois. They
And
had
you,
other chambers that may have existed, but they did not have a state reach and was not connected to the National Black Chamber of Commerce at the same time. So we were fortunate enough that to be connected to the national and to learn a lot about Title VI, Section 3, all the other Civil Rights Act that we quite frankly didn't really know that the law was on our side. And you often talk about we just got to use the law. But
right,
if we
right.
don't understand the law and we don't put the law in effect, then we might as well not have the laws in place. So Art Fletcher and people like others, Perrin Mitchell and others, fought very hard for us to put these things in place. And it's our job to continue the legacy that Dr. King, Malcolm X, and others have done. But it's an economic fight. It's no longer the fight of accommodation, being able to get on the bus and ride the bus. It's now the transition has to be owning the bus, owning the restaurant, and being able to hire people and being able to buy the goods and products and services and sell it to those restaurants because we now have put ourselves into a position to be real
Hmm.
participants in this capitalistic environment. And that's where we're fighting right now is the last big struggle is about economic reciprocity.
Yeah, I think it would be a travesty if we didn't inform our African American business and other leaders in the community about the fact that Art Fletcher and even some of our presidents who were not African American passed some very powerful legislation that really helps us, and we're kind of behind the eight ball in terms of using those tools to help ourselves. But we're going to be making sure that we're going to talk regularly on this program, and we're going to be introducing the community and reaffirming the fact that there are laws and regulations out there that will help you accomplish your goals in business. And we can hold the American Constitution to uphold that. Uh, Larry, we were just talking a few minutes ago about the fact that you probably were the first large black chamber in the state of Illinois. And now we see a lot of chambers coming up claiming to be, state chambers. We know we have a lot of affiliates associated with your organization, but there are other organizations coming up, and there's some confusion about who's the Illinois State Black Chamber, who's the ultimate black chamber in the state in terms of having affiliates across the state. So I'd like for you to talk about how you differentiate yourself from those organizations and then talk about the accomplishments of the Illinois State Black Chamber headed by Larry Ivory as president and CEO.
Yeah. Well, Lee, we're proud of what we've done and what we've accomplished with the help of people like yourself and others. It's been a team effort, but we've been relentless on the issue of economic empowerment. The other organizations, sometimes we have to understand that, the best form of compliment is to try to be like someone. And so people wanted to, who we had trained and had learned from us, they decided that they could start another organization, but was based upon our organization, what they had learned from us. So we had a couple of people who split off and decided that they would change the name a little bit and become a chamber of commerce also, which created some confusion. But the real reality of it is that like it says, may the work we do speak for us. And one thing that separates us is that we have a very clear mission. And the mission of the chamber is to economically empower and sustain the African American community through entrepreneurship and capitalistic activity via interaction with our National Black Chamber of Commerce throughout the Black diaspora, which means that we have a global perspective. We don't just look at what's happening domestically, we look at what's happening around the world. And we have to start the Paris, France Black Chamber of Commerce. We have chambers in over 20 different countries. And that's what distinguishes us, in one instance, distinguishes us against other people who would like to be like us. But really, the real test to us is the work that we've done with transportation, with IDOT, Tollway, Capital Development Board, CMS. We're unique in this regard. One, we sit on boards that have influence over how procurement is done. So we're uniquely positioned in the marketplace to identify what we consider to be disparities in procurement in the state of Illinois, and we have access to that. We also sit on the board of CMS, where we can also help set the goals in terms of minority participation. When a minority contractor, whether it be IT or something else, has a problem, they can address this council to fix the problems. And so if you go back and take a look where we're really strong at on the policy side, one of the things, as you recall, Lee, we were fighting for workman's comp reform. We knew that workman's comp was important. We knew that from the state side that if we had workers' comp reform, that we could attract more businesses. So we try to work in conjunction with workers' comp reform. We did some major things with IDOT at a time where The numbers for African American participation was low, and it's still low. But we took a look at, the Mississippi River Bridge, which we worked with you on, and we took a look at other things throughout the state on bad policies that fundamentally disallow our chance to participate. And what I really want to say to the audience is that highway infrastructure is funded by a motor fuel tax. Blacks drive cars, but when we take a look and drive up and down the highways and the byways of Illinois, we're not seeing blacks on the job sites winning the contracts, but yet we're contributing to the infrastructure of the country. And so we led the charge and fight with IDOT on a continuous basis with the disparity studies, with taking a look at Title VI, taking a look at other discrepancies that obviously existed that we were not participating in. Then we not only did that, we went to take a look at Capital Development Board, which does all the vertical construction for the state of Illinois. And we found there were some significant disparities when it came to African Americans participating in contracting opportunities, not only in terms of winning bids, but in terms of also emergency contracts. We're proud to say that in our engagement with Jim Underwood and other leaders of the Capital Development Board, that we had some major policy changes that benefited everyone. As a matter of fact, one of the specific things that we did is that because we were meeting with those leaders on an ongoing basis, pushing and pressing the flesh on we need more black participation in this area, in this sector. We were relentless in that debate. We brought lots of people. And what we ended up doing is that on the professional services side, uh, African Americans were not bidding on work for the Capital Development Board. Even though it had work, they were not bidding because it wasn't very profitable. Because we had pushed the envelope, we got one of our members, Michael Sutton, who's the president of Infrastructure Engineer. We asked him to chair the committee to take a look at some of the barriers that were stopping engineers and architects from participating. And Mike was the chair of that committee. And when it was all said and done, Mike and his team was able to increase the fees at the Capital Development Board to 10 to 15% higher, which made it attractive enough now for them to go out and bid on work. And so those numbers began to improve. We're seeing significant improvement across the board in terms of the Capital Development Board, not only because they have work now, but also because of policies that we fought for and we worked for to make sure that African Americans were going to get included on a single prime contracting. And then when we go and take a look at, as a rule of thumb, the tollway. The tollway had a terrible record in terms of African American participation. Hispanics were knocking the ball out of the park, where African Americans were barely on the radar screen. We met for years pushing and challenging those numbers, and the numbers were god awful. And we met with the leadership, and we didn't just meet with ourselves. We brought people from all across the state in the meetings to talk about the fact that we're paying tolls. They don't let black people go to the tollway and not pay a toll. So we're paying a toll, but we're not participating. So we pushed the envelope. At that time, they didn't have very many black TAs, technical assistance group, and we were one of the first, and we opened the door for a lot more. So a lot of the TA companies who are in terms of engineers, in terms of construction, we still got a long way to go, but we pushed the envelope.
So let me ask you a question now. What about the shelter market? When you get through with that, I want to talk to you about a little bit about politics, and, surrounding all of what you said. So what is the shelter market? And you guys led that charge. So what was the significance of getting the governor to actually use a law that was already, if I'm right, on the books but was not enforced?
Well, the shared shelter market was one of those wonderful pieces of a procurement law that was never being enforced. And it was a young lady by the name of Charlotte Roberts who hit me to it. And then once I understood it, I went to work on it with a team of people. And what the shelter market said was this is why it was so significant. But believe me, we had to fight, for a couple of years to fight to win this fight, and it was nonstop with attorneys and everybody else because the law existed, but they didn't want to enforce the law, and we couldn't get governors to enforce it, and so it was like a unfunded mandate. It was there, but it had no teeth in it. And so what we did is that one, we got the council, the BEP council, to agree by law because it's a law. We were fundamentally breaking the law because we were not uh, doing some things that we were supposed to do based upon the law. And here's what the sheltered market says. And here's why some people who want to keep things as is didn't want to see it succeed. And that's why they fought us so long and so hard to try to undermine this piece of legislation. But the law says that if you can show discrimination, then you shall establish a sheltered market to correct the discrimination. And it can be negotiated and non negotiated bid. So, say, for example, in IT, that we got a lot of IT companies who got availability, but the reality of it is that they're not winning any contracts. So we got availability, but when we take a look at the contracts being awarded by the state, blacks aren't getting any awards.
Now that was done. That was proven through the disparities were proven through disparity studies, right? So it was
Oh,
they were on the
absolutely.
record. So it wasn't just something that just popped out of the air. We weren't just saying we were being discriminated against, but there were actual studies done by the government that show that there were disparities.
Oh, absolutely. And specific, and it was egregious discrimination. The numbers were so bad, it was alarming. And the sheltered market, now keep in mind that the people who want to keep things as is, the ones who are benefiting the most from it, they don't want to give nothing back. They want it to stay as is. Even though we're not participating, they fundamentally don't care. And so what we had to do is that we had to fight, and I mean fight, political environment, people in positions of power, to get them to get this piece of legislation on the table. Then, fortunate enough, we had Governor Rauner, who I sat down with and said, "Look, I need you, Governor, to support. I just need you to support the law." And he looked into it. I explained it to him, got it to him, and he put an executive order that put teeth into the sheltered market.
Let me
And the
stop you
sheltered
there.
market.
Let me stop you there. Okay, okay. So I've had several people to ask me when I talk about Larry Ivory in the Illinois State Black Chamber. They said, "Man, that's a Republican organization." I said, "Not really." So I want to get into that. Um, when did we become a people that was so immersed in politics, partisan politics, that if we looked a gift, would we look a gift horse in the mouth? If Ronald supported something like the shelter market, which no other governor had done prior to that, why would that be bad for you to be affiliated with a Republican governor when you've been affiliated with Democrats and you've got a political action committee, a PAC, that has funded several Democratic candidates and elected officials? So, talk to me about you being accused of being a Republican when are we voting our pocketbooks or are we voting party?
Well, it's interestingly when the people have a people in control, and you want to keep them in control. Um, People try to spend anything. The reality of it is that of our political PAC, 99.9% of our money went to Democratic Black Caucus members and others, and we supported people. Our philosophy is real simple. We believe in good policy. We don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. Quite frankly, if you were a bear and you had the power to implement a strategy that would be helpful to us, I support the bear, you know, or a monkey, whatever it took. But, when we have anyone in a position of power and we think that, just because they're from a different party, that we can't work with them, that is absolutely ludicrous and it doesn't make any sense, quite frankly. I think our job should be always be just like the normal U.S. Chamber of Commerce or the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. They work on both sides of the aisle when there's issues. When there's issues of common interest and it's something that helps us lead, we have an obligation to work with whoever is putting policies together that is good for black people and black business. And we never shy away from that.
That's
And
absolutely correct.
one of
I totally agree with that philosophy. You know, one of the things I know that came out of your relationship with Governor Rauner was the fact that if you have an LLC a couple of years ago, a few years back, it cost almost $600 to get it implemented. Now it's $75, and renewal is what is it? $75 to renew it. Also, I think it's 175 to get it started and completed,
right.
and $75 for renewal, as opposed to the
Yes.
$500 and the $250 to renew. That's good for business, and particularly black businesses.
Oh, absolutely, Lee. You know, again, people get hung up on party. They ought to be hung up on what's right and what's good for them. And I've supported Quinn when he was running for office. I supported Robert Gorovich. I've supported every sitting governor that's been sitting. And our philosophy is really quite simple. And if we're going to be in helping the people we represent, my job is to represent black businesses. And we believe if you strengthen black businesses, you strengthen black communities, and you strengthen black people. When businesses aren't growing and are not participating, look how ridiculous it would be just because you have a Republican or a Democrat, either one, who has the authority and the power over agencies, and because they're not your party, that you decide you're not going to work with them. Now, I don't know what could be stupider than that.
And let me ask you a question, okay? Having said what you said, do the Hispanics work with both sides of the aisle?
They do.
All right.
They're
White
very
women also are a significant competition for African American businesses. Do they work with both sides of the aisle?
yes, they do.
So why wouldn't a black
But,
organization
but we're
do
the
the
only one.
same?
We're the only one they want to punish or try to punish for being objective because they want us, for whatever reason may be, to do what some people want us to do. And I think that that's a bad strategy. I work with everyone and should work with everyone. The sitting governor, our job is to work with him if we have the opportunity to do so.
But we also
Uh,
have a problem with our own people viewing, working across the aisle as something negative.
well, I think that's the political evolution, Lee, that we have to get to because we don't know. The reality of it is that we don't ever know who's going to win in the White House, who's going to win at the state, and whoever gets in, we still got to work with.
Yeah.
It's just the reality, and it's nothing against one party or the other. It's just how business works, and we have to understand as black business organizations is that if we can get something done to Democrats, we ought to embrace Democrats and work with them. We've done that. We've proven that historically by fact. Senator James Claiborne, who was a great champion, the majority leader of the House, he was one of the best
Senate,
champions that we had, and we were sincerely sorry that he left. But we worked with Senator Claiborne. We worked with Senator Matty Hunter. We met with all of the senators to work on getting things done. But somehow within this dialogue, because we worked with a Republican governor and we got a couple things done, all of a sudden people want to brand us as the a Republican
and
organization
there's
like
things
senators.
there's things that we fought for with the Democratic governors that we didn't get done, that we were able to get done under the Republican governor. And not to disparage any group in particular, but we have to start voting and really analyzing both parties. That we've been with
Absolutely.
Democrats all our lives. So we need to go back and take a look at that and say, how have we fared with
Yeah.
that particular
Well,
group?
I would say this, Lee, because this is a very touchy subject, and normally people are very sensitive to it. But I tell people, there used to be an old girlfriend when I was in high school. I really liked her. Her name was Teresa. I won't mention her last name, but her name was Teresa. And she was a person who I wanted to date. But there was another guy who wanted to date her also. And so we were both trying to woo her. And she ended up picking the best person for her based upon both of her suitors. That's where I think black business people and black people have to be is make both sides compete for your interests and then
Absolutely
pick the
right.
best one for
Absolutely.
you. But make both sides compete.
You know
At
what a
the end
guy
of the
told me? A guy from a Jewish organization told me. He said, "Lee, I don't understand your people." He said, "When the candidates get ready to run for office, they can't. They come to our communities to woo us. Republicans and Democrats alike. He said, but the African Americans, they don't even come to woo you. They just got you in the bank and they know you're going to vote for them because you think the Republicans are the bad guy, which they may be. Because I lean more toward Democratic candidates than Republican, but I'm an independent. I go either way depending on who's going to have my best interest at heart. So the guy merely said that you guys are not making them work for your vote. You're just giving it to them, and the other groups are making them work for their vote. And I think that's what we should do. Not
Oh
because
yeah,
you're a Democrat, automatically say you're okay. Like we need to get with this governor, and we need to get a meeting with him. We need to put some things on the issues on the table, even with the presidential election. What is Joe Biden's black agenda?
absolutely, absolutely. And unfortunately, when we have leadership and who is not asking the fundamental question about, you know, our plan for black people, and we just give our vote but get nothing from it. And if you take a look at some of the alarming things that I find to be alarming to me, um, in the state of Illinois, when they take a look at some of the worst cities in the United States, based upon the Wall Street report, is that Illinois had more of the worst cities in the United States based upon unemployment, crime, and wealth.
In
Some of the
healthcare, in healthcare.
Yeah, we had some of the worst, more cities who were ranked in the top 20 than any other city in the United States. Now that's alarming to me. Now, how do we end up with some of the worst cities in the United States, and yet we got all this black political power that we have? That means that we're not leveraging our power. And I watch Hispanics who have less power than we do, in my honest opinion. Surely don't have the sheer numbers we have, but sometimes it seems like on the business side that they're doing far better than we are. Now, are they better business people than we are? I doubt it. I think that they're leveraging what they have,
Absolutely.
and we've got to do a better job. I have great admiration for the Black Caucus. I think they could be one of the most powerful and influential groups in the state by far. But if we don't come together and work together and listen and set aside petty differences for the sake of our communities, then we fail as leadership
And not only
across
the
the board.
leadership, though, Mr. Ivory, it's the citizens too. We shouldn't put people into office and leave them to be on automatic pilot. We need to have them to come tell us how they're representing our best interests. So I put a lot back on the citizens who send these people to office. Okay, what do you bring us back home? If you brought us back nothing from back from the store, then we need to look at another runner. We need someone who's going to look out for our best interests because we're the ones that sent them to Congress and other places. I lost you. Okay, you back now. So that's how I look at that. Larry, I want to get on something else right quick. Now, what exactly is your organization's official name? Because there's another group with a name so similar to yours that people may be confused. What exactly is your official name and the official name of your biggest, when you want to use the word competitor?
Well, our official name is the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
We don't have a real competitor. We have some people who want to be us,
Okay.
but they're not
And
competitors
what is their
because
name? Give me a couple of names.
you have a group that calls itself the Black Chamber of Commerce of Illinois. You have another group that calls itself the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And then you have another group that calls itself the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce. All are organizations that have been started
Within the
to,
last two
I think,
years?
yeah, and well, most of them have been started in the last year, and the other one has been started in the last couple of years. But quite frankly, they don't have a track record of even coming close to the things we do. We've had, you know, um, leaders from Obama to John Kerry, the Secretary of State, who did videos talking about the great work that the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce is doing and the work that we've done. It's on our website. We've been fighting this fight unapologetically, fighting for black people, having a tremendous impact in every aspect of the states where we walk into meetings and we get things done. We understand policies, we understand how to get things done, and we got a real successful track record of things that people said couldn't get done, But when the chamber got involved in it, we got it done. We had cases where two of our biggest engineering firms had been sanctioned by the Illinois Department of Transportation, which meant it would have meant the death of their business because they would have been put on the sideline for 3 years. You could no longer work for IDOT, and IDOT was a major share of their business. And most people know if you can't work for IDOT, you can't work for the tollway, and you can't work for other Chicago agencies also. So it would have been the death of those business, and they had an official letter saying that was it, and that was done. And people said, well, they hired attorneys, and to try to get them back on track with to no avail. The chamber got involved, and we went and we advocated. And I told them that we cannot afford to have our biggest and our best be set aside and go out of business.
Hmm.
And we fought for it to Secretary of Transportation Ann Snyder and others, and we got them to rescind it. And those businesses are thriving, employing black people, doing some incredible work. But we fought for them. When we believe in fighting for our people, we're unapologetic. When we walk into a meeting, we're not here to talk about white women because they do a good job representing themselves. It don't say that at some point in time we may not have some issues we may come together on. We don't go in there talking about Hispanics. We're here to talk about black businesses and what's impacting black businesses. My brothers, who are my Hispanic brothers, they do a good job fighting for themselves. I don't think they need me to fight for them. And we need to fight for black people and black businesses. And I'm unapologetic about that.
You know,
If someone has a problem with that, they can have a problem with it. But
one
I'm
last
here to represent black businesses.
one last point before we move on. Um, we also got to be smart enough to look and see that if you have an organization that is really pushing the pedal to the metal, you're going to have these groups created by the very government subversively to compete against those that they know are going to throw the gauntlet down. So we have to be careful to make sure that these groups that are coming to fruition right now are not an agent of the particular parties whose best interest is to keep us out of that fray, keep us from being prosperous. But they put these other groups in to that would like the kids say, throw some shade and not really represent your best interest, but give the facade of representing your best interest. We got to be careful of that. So let's look
Well,
at who's doing the job, who's the most hated. When you say Larry Ivory, they say, we hate Larry Ivory. If the establishment hates Larry Ivory and they say they love Joe Blow over here, you better take a look at that. Because in my 68 years on this planet, when the majority organizations, the road builders, the unions, and people like that, if they don't like you, but they like this guy, that means that the guy they don't like is coming the right way, trying to do the right thing, and the other guy is just a facade that they're going to be using to act like they're representing your best interest, but not. So we got to be careful about that.
well, Lee, let me make this comment. I never forget the day when the late Dr. Arthur Fletcher. I called him because he was my mentor, and I was fighting the fight, and really putting my heart into it. And I had left my corporate job and took a 85% haircut and pay to do what I was doing. My wife had left her job. And I called Art Fletcher up one day because it can be really trying sometimes when you're trying to do the right thing for your people, and sometimes they don't necessarily always understand. And so I called him up and I was telling him how frustrated he looked. He said, Larry, it means that you're on the right track. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, if everybody likes you, you ain't doing your job. He says when people start to find ways of lying, undermining, creating competition, that's a sign that you're on the right track. And believe me, we know we're on the right track because what we represent is a true spirit of African American economic empowerment. We're not against anyone. We're just for ourselves. Like I said,
What's wrong with
I
that?
ain't anti-black. I mean, I ain't anti-white. I'm just pro-black.
I
And
got you.
I think injustice against one is an injustice against all. That we ought to fight against any injustice. But black people, like Dr. King says, of the good things in life, the black man has a small portion. Of the bad things in life, he has a double portion. It is our obligation to make things better for African Americans across the board, and our best fight is waged on economic empowerment. and creating the incredible disparity that exists between black wealth and white wealth.
Yeah, we got to do something with that. We're going to talk about COVID now. Dr. Anderson, whom we've met and talked to in very intimate settings, said that the wealth of black people today is the same as it was in 1862. So our income has improved, but our wealth has not. Has not. Okay, Larry, let's talk about COVID. They rolled out a COVID program, and let's talk about what we found out to be disparities in granting loans to African American owned businesses and what is considered a small business these days. Because, wow, $10 million is a small business, a gross, whatever. But let's talk about the COVID deal with the federal and on the state side.
Well, quite frankly, we're experiencing something that we've never experienced in the history of the United States. And it's going to be a fight for our lives, quite frankly. And when you take a look at one of the medical or the inherent medical consequences to blacks, it's already disproportionate. We are suffering at an alarming high rate. Then when we take a look at the economic side of it, because the Congress acted quickly, which I commend them in terms of getting money out. But anytime you act quickly, you make some mistakes. And both Democrats and Republicans were a part of this CARES Act the first time they put the $2.2 trillion out. And they were getting it out because people needed help. And they needed a lifeline right away. In their in their in their haste to get it out, what they didn't look at is that how banks operate and how business is done. And how business is done when they said, based upon the SBA standard of small business, is that SBA standard of small business is 500 employees. Now, in the black community, a small business may be a mom and pop shop that got 3 or 4 people. But by that standard, SBA says 500 and lower, 500 and higher is not a small business. And in some industries, you can have 1,500 and still be considered a small business by the SBA standards. So the money came out, and what happened was we should have anticipated that what happened was that the banks are banks. They're in the business of making money, okay? And they're in the business of creating shareholder equity and value to the shareholders. And they want their stock value to go up because that means they make money. So when the government issued the money, it was clear to me that the banks are going to show up their bad debt. And so if you got someone that have some bad debt, and you have a loan to loss ratio or something in that category, you're going to try to make sure that you give people the money because it's not your money. You're not taking anything at risk. And those individuals get it. If they get it and they can get their loans back in place, so that's good for your bottom line. But then you also got to take care of your key individuals who fall within the criteria, and companies that may not need the money, but they can get the money based upon what Congress put in place. And so what ended up happening is a lot of very successful companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, pardon me, went and they applied for the PPP and they got it. And it meant that the smaller guys who really needed a lifeline, and by the time they got themselves together and got the information, it was too late. And so in the first round, they absolutely got left out. And the second round that they did under the PPP, there was a lot of attention being brought to bear because small businesses did not participate in the opportunity the first round, and we were fairly certain that it was going to happen in the second round. Now the second round obviously got a little bit better, and I say a little bit better, I mean a little bit better. It was not as bad as the first round, but nonetheless, the numbers are going to show that African American small businesses did not get a lifeline, and that a lot of people got turned out. And banks were using all kinds of weird um, games that they were playing in terms of denying African Americans. Some banks would just outright tell you that, they hadn't got the information when they had the information. They would tell you things that you had to have a credit card or you had to have a loan with them, that you had to jump to all these different hoops. And so a lot of people got discouraged and didn't even apply or applied and got rejected and just gave up. And so, therein is a problem, and that I estimate, Lee, we can lose 30% of black businesses may not survive this COVID, this
State
pandemic
of
that we're
Illinois or across the nation.
across the nation,
Okay.
Lee, across the nation. It will be absolutely devastating. We're not only losing the lives of people who are contributing to our communities and our families, but we're losing also the income that they generate within our families.
Okay.
So when they die, their income goes, it's done.
Okay. Let me
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I said we got a serious problem that we have to unite on because black people lives are being absolutely torn apart in a much more dramatic way. I'm not saying that other people aren't suffering because they are, but proportionately, black people are suffering at a greater rate on death, on a greater rate when it comes to loss of business and economic opportunity. Can you imagine someone who's still trying to get unemployment, gig economy, which a lot of us are in? We're still waiting for the state to get IDS up, so they ain't got no money. They can't buy no groceries. When we think about buying protective equipment for people who are in lower income, who live in the projects, they talk about social distancing. But Lee, when you're five people in a house and you got two bedrooms and one TV, you're talking about social distancing. That's difficult, if not impossible. So we had made a request to the governor that one, we ought to make sure that those who cannot afford it, that the state or the government basically earmark resources to them so they can get the resources, so we can reduce the spreading of the pandemic, and then it ought to be bought through black distributors, which I think is critical too,
Okay.
because
So
the state.
how does the governor? The governor's got his team of people in different agencies, CMS, DCEO, and places like that. But who are and who should be the boots on the ground that the governor should be sitting down talking to in real time that has their hand on the controls, who understands that?
Believe one of the things is clear that we are the largest voice of black business in the state of Illinois, hands down. You ask anyone across the state, we talk to the major, black media partners from WVON and everybody else. Everybody knows that the chamber is one of the strongest voices in the black business community, hands down. We got chambers throughout the whole state of Illinois, and so we cover the state of Illinois, not just Chicago. We cover downstate, East St. Louis, where you're at, as a Southern Regional VP. Will Cowles is our Central VP covering Champaign, Decatur, surrounding in the Central Illinois, Peoria, Galesburg. And then we have the Northern region, Reverend Gass and George Coleman and others in the Northern region. So we have our fleet, we have our thumb on the pulse.
So
We know what's
it's really
happening.
important that the governor meet with the chamber to discuss what you know is the reality on the ground, because those agencies are not on the ground like you are with your various connections throughout the state and your relationship. You have a lobbyist, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're
Paul
doing it.
Williams.
So
Yeah.
Paul Williams. So we're doing it. So who would be better to talk to find out what's going on and formulate the strategy to correct it, except by talking to someone with an organization like yours?
Well, I don't think there's anyone, quite frankly, Lee, who has a better insight of, because every morning we get up, what do? We serve black businesses. I mean, it ain't like we do it part time and go do something over here the next day and do something over here today. Every day we get up, we focus on strengthening black businesses, helping black businesses grow. So we know the pain. We hear the tears and the sorrow in people's voices because they're going to have to shut down their business and they can't get any money that they tried and that their family is suffering. We hear that. And so we know what's happening. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that this governor is hearing and talking to perhaps one of the best voices when it comes to black. I know he has a lot of things he's doing, and if you ask me, he's done a pretty good job of trying to control this virus and get it under control. But in spite of that, you have to be able to manage a number of things. and being able to talk to the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce, the strongest voice of black business in the state, I think it's crucial. I think it's important for our community and for black business across the state to know that we have a governor who cares about black businesses and not just talking to um, all kinds of other people who don't have our reach and don't have our ability to impact black business in the way that we do.
Okay, Larry, a couple of things before we close out. Um, we're asking people who will be listening to hopefully this broadcast to engage their elected representatives to demand that the governor sit down and meet with the biggest business organization in the state of Illinois, and because they're going to play a major role. The people in the communities are going to play a major role because the community drives the politician. They should be driven towards the governor making some type of reaction towards, listening to your organization. And then how can people reach you and your organization and the state on the state level? Could you give your website and your phone number out, please?
Yeah, well, our website is ILB as in boy, CC.org, and that's our website. Our phone number for the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce is 309 740 4430.
Okay, repeat that one more time, Larry.
The website is ILBCC.org. Our phone number is 309 740 4430.
Okay, and the last question, and we have to leave. In lieu of trying to get involved in this COVID fiasco, disaster, what have the chamber done to reach out to businesses on a state and a national level to get businesses engaged in understanding? You said PPP, that stands for Payroll Protected Program. So what have the chamber done to get involved and try to help businesses get those loans and grants?
Well, Lee, we've been involved in every aspect in terms of the banks, in terms of the conversation. We had conversation with people at the White House, leadership from Cory Booker, all kinds of people. We're fighting to make sure that black business, and we do conference calls so that we can inform. The state is doing some conference calls out there that's making a positive difference. There's a guy by the name of Matt with DCO who's doing some conference calls also.
His last name Sampson? Is that Matt Sampson?
Yeah, Matt Sampson.
Doing a great job. He's really pushing the agenda. Yes.
And he's there to help. And so there's resources there. But one of the things we asked the governor for is that we got to put money in the black media's hand so that black people know where their opportunities are. And and the media is the best way of doing that. And it don't have to be a lot of money, but we got to keep this information flowing to our hands. About time, sometimes we get the first round, a lot of people were just beginning to understand it. And about time they got ready to understand it, the money was gone.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to be having this conversation quite often, Larry, between yourself and myself. We'll bring on other guests too, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to be engaged to a great degree with our business, not only during COVID, but during if we ever get back to normal time. So this is going to be a vehicle that we're going to be using to reach out to our communities and hear the voices from people like yourself and other, even administrators with the state, even a governor if he chooses to, and our elected officials. So Larry, at this time, I'd like to thank you and really appreciate having this conversation with you, man. And